So again, a big hello to you all and thank you for being here and to those people who are listening to this week's recording. So it's week 4 and the workload is starting to increase with our first assignment due next Tuesday. So if you do need an extension for that assignment, then on the unit site there is a request for an extension form and you'll need to include supporting evidence, and that needs to be sent to Dr. Wendy Weber, our unit chair, who will provide you with a response. So, but again, if that is the case, then make sure you do submit that before the due date and not too late or not after. Otherwise, it's a different set of procedures that needs to be undertaken if you request or if you miss the due time and day and would like that special consideration. So that's a different set of procedures. So just to be mindful of those things. But that information is all in the unit guide on the unit site, and do reach out if anything's unclear. But hopefully you're all tracking along okay. You've been able to plan your time and organise yourself to meet those tasks. The first assignment's a really good indicator. As we've said, it's a progress assignment. So it is practicing those key academic, research, writing, referencing skills. And like any skill, you get better with practice. So this is what this first assignment is designed to be about, practicing those key skills. And then you'll get a bit of an idea of how long those tasks take you, particularly the writing and the researching side of things, that 500-word essay, because then you've got to do that in your assignment 1.2, the business report, in a longer format. And so there are 3 500-word tasks in that business report. So this first assignment, it's a good sort of measure for timing and where your strengths are and what you found a little bit challenging, so that you can be in a better position to write that longer report. And once you submit your 1.1 next week, you will get your feedback within 15 working days. That's the Deakin University policy. But don't wait to start your assignment. You can make a start on your report after you submit your 1.1. Hey, I just had a couple of quick questions about assignment 1. Is there a specific template we need to use for the assignment, or just a Word document that we create? So to answer that first question first, so that there is, for 1.1, there is no template. So you just open up a Word document as you suggest, and your assignment will most likely be 4 pages. So 1 page for your 500-word mini essay. Page 2 will have your reference list for your mini essay. Page 3 will have your draft table of contents, which is your plan of headings to use for your assignment 1.2 business report due in week 8. And then page 4 is your draft list of references for the sources you plan to use in your business report. And you'll format those in APA 7 style and in alphabetical order by family name and so on. So really just 4 pages. When you go to write your business report, there is a template that you can download, but you can create your own. So yeah, either one will be fine. Second question, as well as, do we just order the different activities in chronological order? I'm not quite sure I understand that question. Would you like to just explain what you mean by chronological order?
No, it's all good. You've already answered my question. It's all good. Thank you so much.
Oh, okay, cool. Excellent. So, yeah, any other questions, keep them coming, and happy to answer them. All good. Are there any other questions? I do have the assignments here if we need to have a look. So that is 1.2, isn't it? And this is 1.1. Are there any other questions in relation to this? GW, you say yes. What's your question? Let me know. Don't no apologies. All questions are welcome. I'm happy to repeat myself. It's all good. Are you typing, or do you want to turn on your microphone? When analysing the organisation, yep. No mic. Okay, no worries. All right, well, you keep typing that question, and I will, unless anyone has any other questions, well, I might come back to that, and depending on how long your question is and how quick a typer you are. So I might return to the slides. What if different aspects of the organisation falls into different quadrants? So yeah, I think Donovan's answered this different variations of that question in the discussion forum. So I think you might find some of his answers correctly. And yeah, that may be that they do fall into different quadrants. And so yeah, you present the evidence that you find, and you use those supporting examples to say, well, they don't have a dominant culture. And in fact, they address each of these quadrants, perhaps some in stronger ways than others, or perhaps equally. Again, your findings will be determined by your research and what you find. Yeah, so it's just, again, it's evidence-based. This is what the examples tell me, this is what the website says, and this is how I interpret that. Excellent. All right, so this week though, we are looking at ethics and social responsibility, or corporate social responsibility, and sustainability issues. So that's our topic, and so turning now to our agenda for today, we're looking at again trying to understand perhaps the difference between ethics and social responsibility. And one way we sort of say is that ethics often is really focused on the people and the individuals, whereas CSR's more connected to organisations and what they do. But certainly business ethics is that applied side of ethics and how it sort of actually works and operates. Certainly the CSR topic, this is an important topic for your assignment 1.2, and it's task 2. So that you'll need to talk about a definition and explanation of what is CSR, and then you'll apply those concepts to your organisation and look at some of the things that they're doing, and you'll evaluate how effectively they are or how well they are implementing those programs. And you might sort of look and see, well, are they doing kind of like the bare minimum, or are they doing a little bit more and going beyond that minimum criteria? Have we gone over the theory relating to task A 1.2.1? Let's just have a look. I've got to refresh my memory. It is 1.2, so just scrolling down to this one, the strategic objectives of an organisation. So we'll be looking at strategic management in next week's topic, week 5. So that would be useful there in week 6. And and then this week's topic, week 4, is looking at task 2, and then this one here, the management skills. So that's going back to the early weeks where we looked at the different skills that managers need to be a team leader. So those interpersonal skills and problem-solving skills and things like that. So yeah, I think this one is for next week. No problem. Okay, so returning to our agenda here, so we'll do some activities in relation to understanding where we get our ethics from, and perhaps reflecting on your own ethics, and then we'll be looking at how it operates in organisations. Because again, I've got my version of ethics, you've got your version of ethics, but if we're working for the same organisation, maybe our ethics might be different, but we've all got to work together and make sure we're doing the right thing in the organisation. So it's really important that organisations have clarity about what is acceptable and unacceptable in that workplace. And sometimes that's guided, of course, by law. So we'll look at those sorts of things. So we'll be looking at an article written by a Deakin academic, Greg Wood, and that might not fill you with excitement to be looking at an academic journal article, but really we'll be looking at again, just a bit of a reminder about some of the key features of a journal article and practicing those skimming and scanning skills. So, and we'll be doing some selective reading, so not a full sort of 40-page intensive read. So, but just practicing some of those key skills that we're emphasising in this unit. And then in the second half, we'll be looking at the CSR and some other aspects in relation to how that operates in an organisation, of course, discussing those links to your organisation. Are there any questions or comments before we begin? All going okay? All right. So again, keep that chat box busy, and I'll be checking it regularly. Okay, so our first activity, I've got here a Mentimeter quiz, and so you'll see, let's see, I thought, yep, there we are. I'll just go get rid of that. And so it's Mentimeter. I'm not sure if you've done this before, but you've got a couple of options in how to do the activity. The first one is to scan the QR code, maybe with your smartphone. The second way to do that, and I'll share with you the link in the chat box, is to open up a new tab on your computer, and you'll be able to go straight to the quiz. And so it's just a matter of typing in a comment box to answer the question. Let me know if you're having problems or how you're going. And we've got our first question, and again, it's anonymous, so feel free to answer how you would. Wrong one. Fantastic. I can see some responses. Just give you a few more moments to do that, and then we'll have a look. All right, I think we've got majority of people who have done that. Let me present that. And here we go. So thank you for those people who had a go at doing that. So let's have a look at our responses, and hopefully you'll be able to see the full range of responses there. So our question was, what would you do if you found a wallet containing $100? What have we got? Hand it in, figure out the owner. Yeah, maybe have a look inside and see if there's any ID there. And someone's had the same suggestion. If I had the idea of the person, you'd return it with $100. If there was no ID, you'd keep the cash. Yes, these are some of the things that you need to consider. Return it to the organisation or closest place it was found. Yeah, so for example, if it's like at Deakin, you might hand it into security. Or yeah, take it to the police. Nothing. So you just keep walking perhaps. Give it to the nearest store, drop it off at the closest police station, look at the license and contact the person. Excellent. Keep it. Oh, there's a couple there. Keep it. We're all different. Take it to the, yep. So there we go. If you're at a restaurant or something, give it to the manager. If you're in the road, then give it to the police or the authorities. Be honest and hand it in, because it's happened to you before and they were honest and didn't take my money. Yeah, that's so if, yeah, something if you've got that experience, that can guide your behavior too, because you know what it's like. You'll have empathy for the other person in that situation. So, so $100. What about if you found $1,000? Would that change? Those people who said they'd keep $100, would that change your response if it was a greater sum of money? Sketchy, take it to the police. Same response, police, police. So yeah, so again, sometimes take some payment for returning it, a commission. Definite police, who carries that much? Oh, so you might, I see, yes, a lot of money is a bit dodgy. I see. Yeah, no, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I can see what you're coming from. So wouldn't change your answer. Right. So sometimes the intensity of the amount, how great it is, or bigger the consequences, or the degree of intensity might have some bearing on your response. Like if you were walking along and you just found $5, then maybe you wouldn't go to the trouble of handing it into the police. So yeah, fantastic. Thanks everyone. Some things to think about. So if we are looking at okay, you paid cash for your dog. Yeah, animals are expensive, aren't they? So what are some of your ethical beliefs? So honesty, not stealing, that is certainly something there. But any other sort of things that guide our behavior in terms of what's right and what's wrong? Consequences. Okay. Yeah. Being able to sleep at night, if having peace of mind and not having the guilt or the shame or whatever. The consequences to others, how it affects others. Yeah, that might have some bearing on your choice of actions. And how you were raised. Great. So that leads me to my next question. Yeah, what are some of the biggest influences on your personal ethics? A sense of humanity. So yeah, we are all in this together, and we want to be treated the way we treat others. Yeah. Or we want to treat others the way that we want to be. Yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So culture, that's a big one, isn't it? And yeah, your parents, your friendship groups. Yeah, that peer pressure can make it. Yeah, can be really strong in terms of guiding you and perhaps saying, bringing you back down, saying, no, that's not on. Personal experience. Yeah. So having some reflection about events and yeah, going back, you've lost your wallet in the past and you know how that feels. So having some empathy to others in that situation. Mental health. What do you mean by that? Law,
So
society.
if you had
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
conditions such as narcissism. So it's
Okay.
not necessarily your environment, but like if you had disorders, you may have different ethics.
Certainly, absolutely, yes. And again, we're all different, and we're all living together, aren't we? So that may be a big factor there for some people. And religion, yes, there are the Ten Commandments in the Bible, and the Quran has similar sorts of principles there too. The people you surround yourself with, and the way that you view their actions, if acceptable or not. Yeah, that community can really sort of police you and support you. That's right, and that can have a big effect too. Excellent. So from what we're saying here, these are things that are ingrained to us from a very early age, and we do learn, don't we, what's right and what's wrong, and that can evolve as we go through the world. What about ethical dilemmas? Have you had any experience about perhaps being a bit unclear about the choice to make, where, because we talk about ethics being, right and wrong, but, when there's a dilemma, it's that sort of grey area. And sometimes, we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. So have you got any experiences of dilemmas that you may have faced? You were the chairman of an owners corporation that had ethical binds all over. Ah, yes. Well, with things like that, you know, there may be some conflict of interest, making sure people don't, if their contracts perhaps being done, then not showing favoritism. Between a rock and a hard place. Yeah, that's a great way of phrasing it. Training example was always a tough one. Oh, the who do you save? Yes, that's an interesting one, isn't it? So yeah, it can be a little bit tricky, and so you know, there's a few things that are that can guide us when you're stuck to know what to do. Just reading Chris's, decisions have to be made. Laws are established, but OCs are run by owners who aren't always aware of the laws and decide by their feelings instead. Right. Okay. So yeah, that's a very tricky one, isn't it? Because yeah, if you're making a decision, you know, you've got to be able to justify it with evidence and perhaps try and be objective. And by being objective, you're looking at all the different perspectives and trying to weigh them up and be fair. So yeah, when the emotions come in, that can be very, very tricky. Telling someone else a secret, that's a great example of a dilemma, particularly if it has consequences for other people. You know, oh wow, gosh, there's some there's some great examples coming through. You knew a girl who went for a pregnancy test and she didn't realize a family friend worked at the clinic. Family friend rang and told the family. Wow, that's a real breach of confidence, isn't it? Maybe they need help, but you don't want to betray trust. Yes, that's right. It's a really tricky balance. And sometimes we have professional guidelines, like in that medical centre there would be very clear guidelines about what to do. But sometimes if it's a friend, those guidelines aren't quite so clear cut. What would guide you to perhaps make the right decision if you're really unclear? What do you use to guide you? So Chris, yeah, you said, you know, using your feelings again, emotion. So gut feelings, instinct, weighing up which is of benefit to the most people, right? Yep. Asking for advice. Does it feel sick? Does it make you feel sick? Yeah, that's right. You know, that anxious feeling or that and that's what happens when we're in a dilemma. And sometimes knowing what you might do beforehand, particularly in the workplace, if you're not quite sure about, you know, where that line is, you know, when you're not in the midst of a dilemma, finding out those sorts of ways of, you know, how things operate and what you could do in that situation can be really helpful for if and when you need it. Thanks, Chris, for that follow-up. I'm glad, yeah, they're safe now. Yeah, if you are second questioning it, you really know the answer. Yeah, and that's a good indication, isn't it? If that queasy feeling, you know, this isn't right, doesn't sit well, and asking for advice is a good one too. Talking to someone who's objective and whose opinion you value and is credible and can be helpful. And in the workplace, that might be someone who's a bit more experienced or someone who's a bit more expert in that area, who might be able to guide you. And certainly there are different codes of conduct and things like that that might be able to help as well if you're unclear. So yeah, really, really tricky, isn't it? And so when we're looking at these sorts of ethical dilemmas, there's a lot of things that sort of influence people's choices as well. Again, you know, our family and friends and our culture, what are the legal requirements, but also there's some other dilemmas there in the recommended section on the unit site. But one of the theorists, Kohlberg, he talks about how the moral development of people and says that there are different stages. So someone with really low level of moral development might not be too anxious and stressed about these sorts of problems, but someone who is a lot more further down that sort of development stage will be less likely to take risks and are more thoughtful and considered in terms of their approach. And I'll just read you some statistics. That he says that in reality, only 20% of adults ever reach that final stage of moral development where their internal principles guide their decisions. And most adults are kind of stuck in the middle stage. And that's where they need to look outside of their themselves and in their workplace, perhaps to senior managers or HR or mentors or something like that to help to guide them with ethical decision making. So for us, being future managers, this is something to be mindful of, that, people do need that guidance. Ideally, everyone will know what to do, but of course that comes with a lot of training and maybe some online activities, or maybe just experience, as you've sort of mentioned there in some of the posts on the chat box. So, all right. So thank you so much for all of those contributions. And we can see just how diverse it is and how tricky it is. Another one too is, can you see yourself being put on the front page of the newspaper? Will your choice, what would your mother say? Some people say that too. Some people have very close social circles with very similar views, and therefore it's like an echo chamber. They then will very rarely have a change in opinion and morals. That's a really thoughtful point. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, again, that can be very, very tricky. So I've got just on that, when we're talking about some of the ethical principles that guide us, have another activity. We looked at this in the class, but this is an activity from the this week's topic, week 4. And if you have a look at the recommended section under interactives, there's a drag and drop activity, and this just refreshes your memory about what some of those principles are. So you might remember that there are 7 principles. I'll just get the page up and we can have a look. There is that one. So week 6. And in the recommended, and what I might do is quickly share this page with you. So you've got it there. Just takes a minute to load. Taking a couple of minutes to load, but hopefully you found it. Here we are. So under interactives, and if you scroll down, I am in the right week. Oh, week 6. How did I get to week 6? Sorry, everybody. There it is. So it's just dragging and putting them there, and you'll get your response at the end. So I'll just return to so just ignore that previous link and let me share the right one. And I'm just going to return to the screen there. So that activity, just a bit of a refresher. Again, you can have a look at the link to the chat box. And what we're going to do is a bit of a quick activity. So just give me a thumbs up when you've got those 7 principles in view and done. And then we'll have a look at the next activity. Thanks, Angela. So this is just a quick reference. How are we going? Great. Thanks, Jessica. Okay, is that enough time for most people to have finished? The link, I can share with you the link in for the textbook as well. It's another source. Okay, well, just while we're finishing that, and I'm just getting the textbook link up. So there's our link to the textbook in the chat box there too. Okay, so just while you're finishing that, I'm just going to explain the next activity. So with this next activity, we'll be using those 7 principles, and I'm going to place you into some breakout groups. And so in your breakout group, have a bit of a chat, introduce yourself, say hello, all those sorts of things. And we're going to, I'll ask your group, and it might be good if, one person can share their screen. So again, it's a good focal point and you've got something to talk about. Maybe you can take some notes as well. And in your group, I'll ask you to select 2 ethical principles, and to make sure you understand what those 2 are. It's up to you. I'll leave it up to you and to which ones you choose. And then I'd like you to apply those 2 principles to these situations. So the first one there is how a manager might deal with employee theft. So if there's an employee and they've stolen something, so how would you apply those 2 principles to that situation? And the second situation, to apply your 2 chosen principles. If there was a university student who had plagiarized an assignment, so how would the university use those principles to guide what action they take with that particular student? Okay, and then you might have a think about, well, what are some of the ethical dilemmas that might be involved in these situations? What are some considerations? All right. So I'll pop you into breakout groups. Turn on your mic, say hello, introduce yourself, and as a team, select 2 principles from those 7, and then see if you can apply those 2 principles to these 2 situations. Would 10 minutes be enough to discuss the issues, or do you need a little bit longer? What are your thoughts? 10 minutes might be enough, or 5 minutes per case? We'll see how we go. So the time is 6:36. So I'll check on you about 6:46 around that time, and maybe we'll plan to come back at about maybe 6:50 by the time we all go into groups and have a chat and all those sorts of things. But if you come back earlier, that's all good. Now, is everyone clear? Do you have any questions? Fantastic. Thanks for that feedback. That's great. Those thumbs up mean a lot to me, so that we're all good. Okay, so I'm going to pop you into breakout rooms. If there are particular people that you have a preference to work with, let me know and I'm happy to do that. Okay, so we'll pop you into well, I could pop you into 7. Look, we'll leave it as is. I'll leave it up to free choice. And okay. Okay, creating the group now and opening up your rooms, and see you in about 10 minutes or so. Great. So we've got everyone back, and thank you all for participating in that activity, and hopefully, again, another opportunity to get to know your classmates. Keeping in mind too that this is a great place to meet people for assignment 2. So, you know, opportunities to interact and engage with others is also really motivating. So let's hear what you had to say about your ethical principles and our situation here. Is there a group that would like to go first, to volunteer first?
I'm happy to go first.
Great, thanks.
It's group 5.
Thanks, Jessica. Okay, so tell us your principles and how you went.
So we discussed rights/legal first, and in both scenarios, it's best. So the first scenario, he's obligated to report it, and with the university, it's best for them to punish it because outside of uni, it is against the law because it can violate copyright laws.
So yeah, with the rights approach, very much tied in with all those legal constraints and obligations and compliances. Yep.
And then also from a virtue perspective, they're both in the wrong. So from others' perspectives, it depends what you're stealing, but from a virtue perspective, stealing is just wrong in all cases, and plagiarizing is always wrong. So it should always be punished.
Okay. Great stuff. I sense that you had a bit of fun with this.
We also talked about the sorry, let me think of the name quickly. We also discussed the relativism approach. Like, it's not hurting anyone, it's just the company. But yeah, that would depend on the people. But relativism is an interesting way to think about it.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I know a lot of students work for companies where it is, it's just part of the culture. But you go to another company, it might be very different. So yeah, it's about comparing things, isn't it? All right, great. Would anyone else like to add anything to that, or is there another group that looked at the same principles and had perhaps a different outlook or agree? Okay. Oh, well, thanks very much, Jessica, and good stuff for volunteering first. Really appreciate that and get the discussion going. All right, so we had group number 5. Any other group that would like to speak up next? Simon, go ahead.
Go next.
Thank you. Yeah. So you are group number 3.
Is that me, Simon, or is it somebody?
Oh,
have
we got 2 Simons in the class?
No, I think somebody just spoke.
No, sorry, I was just about to speak up and then you said Simon. Sorry about that.
Oh, sorry. I saw the mic off and it was Simon, but it was Ryan. Sorry, Ryan. No, you go ahead first, Ryan. And Simon, you can take a bit of a breather for a second. Sorry to put you.
That's good.
That's
fine.
That heart rate up for a second. Sorry, Ryan. Go ahead. Thanks. And you're group number 1. Thank you for volunteering.
Yeah, so we talked about universalism first of all. So we would considering the welfare and risks of all parties. So probably when we were thinking about the employee theft, it was probably not just thinking about how we're going to punish them, but or deal with it, but also thinking about what's actually caused them to act in this way in the first place, and how that what the organisation can do in the future to prevent them acting in that way, not just within their work here, but elsewhere as well.
Great. Yes. Yeah, no, that's a really thoughtful response. Having it's connected to, it's not just an isolated incident, but it's connected to other factors that the employer may be responsible for, not educating, not enforcing, not clarifying, not training. Great. Yeah.
Yep. And then probably also very similar for the second one with universalism, what's caused the student to act in this way, but then the university can also look for ways to prevent or to use that feedback sort of to prevent other students doing it in the future as well, and create awareness about academic integrity and that sort of thing.
Great. So it's not just necessarily focusing on the punishment side, but the university has a duty to train the student and make it a learning opportunity to do better next time. So,
yep.
Yeah, great.
Definitely. And then the second one we focused on was virtue ethics.
Yep.
So just like the traits. So with the employee there, first of all, we sort of talked about what the firm wants their employees to be, like what would be their ideal employee, just with their character traits, and really just creating a really good culture within the employee space so that it's a good organisation to be around.
Yeah, and that is so important, isn't it, from the organisational view, to make sure you are hiring the right people and that selecting people whose values and principles align with the organisational values and principles. Yeah, great.
Yeah, and that's pretty much all we got so far.
Okay, yeah, a bit harder to do that for a university, isn't it? Perhaps screen, but
probably a similar thing, though, just with like the culture and that. You really want a culture where students feel comfortable asking questions and seeking help when they don't know as much about like academic integrity or whatever it is.
Yeah, good point. And I guess too, where the university needs to perhaps understand the reasons why students might do that. Are they under pressure, or maybe they haven't had enough support in the learning side of things that they do resort to those sorts of actions as perhaps a means of desperation. And so, yeah, that education, training, awareness, positive culture, open culture, talking about it is really important. Great stuff. Thanks, Ryan, and your team there. Really more great contributions. So I think I put Simon on the spot there, but are you willing to step up, or is there another spokesperson?
No, that's fine. Yeah. For the first one, we thought that virtue ethics, justice, and utilitarianism overlapped a little bit in all that, because on a job situation, the person could be dealing with personal problems like addictions, gambling, or drugs, or they could just be a kleptomaniac. But in my experience with stealing from an organisation, generally they probably would get the sack or they'd lose their job. But I guess it does depend. But punishment, we decide that punishment should be a benefit to the organisation as a whole. It sets a bad precedent if they don't get punished appropriately, particularly for a legal matter. So I guess it's up to the organisation to decide, but it's going to affect others one way or the other if they get it wrong, I guess. And for the second one, we felt that justice and universalism overlapped again, because we felt that personal issues that might be affecting someone could be bad time management or panic. They might have an unreasonable parental or cultural pressure to succeed. And I'm not sure what happens with a uni if it's just an automatic loss of your degree, but we thought that maybe admin has to weigh up taking someone's degree off them and affecting their future, and would be based on the level of plagiarism, I guess. But I don't know how it works really. So that's what we came up with.
Fantastic. And it's great you've looked at all, all the different aspects to it. And this is where we're sort of coming into that. What are the ethical dilemmas around this? Sometimes, there's more to it. It's not so clear cut. Like, for example, the personal background of the person who steals, or maybe the amount that they steal or the frequency. So that, there's different sort of behaviors that are on a spectrum in terms of bad to really, really bad. And likewise with the student as well, the degree of plagiarism in their assignment. Is it repeated behavior? Are they in their first year learning, or are they in their, final year about to graduate and should perhaps know better? So, this is starting to see some of the nuances in those individual aspects and how that might be then dealt with based on these principles. So, the justice approach, then, it's wrong and needs to be punished. Whereas the universalism, then that might sort of take into consideration some of those other aspects that you mentioned there. Great discussion. Thanks very much there, group number 3. Is there another group who would like to share your discussion points? Again, it would be great if you can volunteer. I'm not going to force any group to and put them on the spot, but do feel free to contribute. Is there anyone who'd like, and you can always message each other behind the scenes. You do it, or I'll do it. Last call. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for all of those contributions. And again, just in the same activity, but we had such a diverse range of viewpoints, and that's where, we can really see how complex a simple problem can be, and that's really the paradox there. So again, looking at these principles, there are different ways of approaching problems, but when we're a bit unsure, perhaps we can use these principles as guidelines to perhaps see which is the best way, or perhaps to see where our values align and what we agree with the most. But certainly from an organisational perspective, having clear practices in terms of what that line is and what shouldn't be crossed is really important. And that way everyone's on the same page and there's it tries to minimise as much ambiguity as possible. All right, so next activity, are there any other further comments or questions that people would like to have before we move on to the next activity? Or anything that you thought of while people were talking and want to add? So are there any questions about Deacon's plagiarism policy? Is anyone have any questions about that while we've talking about it?
Hopefully we never have to find out.
Good point. Absolutely right. And certainly, I mean, in the past we did take I guess a justice approach, like, this is it is quite procedural. And, if you did it, then you would be punished, and there were quite severe consequences. But they have moved to, I guess, understanding a little bit more. Yeah, that's a great question, Brittany. Perhaps a little bit more of which one would it be? Again, maybe the ethical relativism. And so comparing degrees of plagiarism and perhaps degrees of intent or intentionality, I should say, as to their approach. So, and in the past, when students submitted their assignments, it was only the markers who could view the Turnitin report, and that was used as a sort of punitive measure to punish the students for plagiarism. But we've since changed our viewpoint, and you will have access to Turnitin and to submit your drafts before the marker does. And so you've got an opportunity to use that as a learning tool to see how you have incorporated your source material into your writing. So certainly there are different approaches. And again, it's becoming more complex too, as we saw with our discussion last week with ChatGPT and, contract, you can source out people to write and pay for those sorts of contract cheating and collusion, and there's a whole range of different ways to not have academic integrity, and so that's sort of taken into consideration too. But there is a bit of a, if you are reported for academic integrity, then you will go to a committee, and they will review your work and make an assessment as to what the consequence may be. So it may be that perhaps you might, depending on the severity, you might get 0 for that particular assignment, and so on. So it's sort of on a scale. So certainly it would be very rare to be expelled from the university unless it was very, very serious or over, several times. So, but yeah, as you say there, hopefully it's something that you'll never have to deal with. But being aware of those sorts of procedures is really important too. Okay, so, but again, we're a first year unit, and this is why we have these conversations, again, so that you are in a good position to know what that line is. Okay, so our next activity is turning now to moving perhaps from the personal to the organizational side of things, and that applied business ethics. And so we have an academic journal article for you to have a look at. And again, we'll do this in your groups, and I'll share this article with you in the chat box, but you can also access it in the week 4 seminar resources folder. And I'll also attach it to the chat box as another way to access it. So let me know again in the chat box that you have that file ready to go. And I've just attached, or it's just loading now in the chat box, and there it is there. So hopefully you can see that. And so just give me a thumbs up that you have that article, and you can click on that link, the DOI link, and you can access it there. Otherwise, just to go to the chat box and to download it from there. And it looks, hang on. Looks like this. Great, thank you so much for that feedback. That's so helpful. Okay, so here's our article. Now, remember from week 2, we looked at the features of a journal article, and just while you may be downloading that or finding it. So do you remember what some of the key features of an academic journal article are? Just by looking at it, what do you recognize as being a journal article? Structure, great. Can you give some more information about that? What sort of sections? Fantastic, super. Abstract, introduction, separate paragraphs with headings, yeah. Great, that abstract is a big clue too. Sometimes it doesn't have that heading there, but yeah. And that's like when you do your report, it's kind of like the executive summary of the journal article. Title, author, yeah, great. So the title of the source, it says Journal of Business Ethics. So that's a bit of a clue. The author here is an academic at a university. It's got references. Absolutely, we can see some in-text citations and also the end-text references. So if we were doing an assignment on ethics, we might perhaps look at the reference list and piggyback off that to use as sources and find them ourselves as primary sources, results, discussion, conclusion for the sections in the report. Fantastic. So all those features give us a good indication that this is a reliable, credible source. And certainly if we go through the Deakin Library databases, we can use the filter to check peer-reviewed, and when our search history comes up, it tells us to the type of source. So that's another advantage of going through the Deakin Library. Non-emotive language. Excellent point. Well done. So yeah, it's using third-person voice, formal, a bit of distance from the writing there. That's a really good point. And sometimes we get a bit confused with what is academic language. And so, yeah, in reflective writing, we can use the first person voice. But yeah, third person voice is needed for that. I'm just getting up a link there too, just to share with you for more information there. Okay, so what we're doing, we're not going to be looking at this in full. And here we are. So just for those people who are a bit unsure about what we were talking about there with the non-emotive language, here's a link about academic style, Deakin Study Support. So I'm just going to return now to the PowerPoint slide, and we're going to answer these questions. So again, just in, let's see, we might sort of, again, just in your groups, you might just have a look at, so group number 1, if you have a look at question number 1, and group number 2, if you have a look at question number 2, group number 3, question 3, and so on and so forth. And if everybody can do question number 7. So 2 questions in total. So your group number and that corresponding question, and everyone in addition to do question 7. So what I'd like you to do is just to skim read that to find the relevant section, and then just to read that relevant section. So you're sort of skimming and scanning. So skimming is reading, getting the gist, the general information, and scanning, you're looking for specific words or ideas in the text. So you might sort of scan first to get the key section, and then just have a bit of a read through to get the main idea. So we just want an overall sort of sense of what that information means. Okay. Would you happy just to do it in the main room here, or pop into the group? So you might want to take a screenshot of that question, or I can pop the questions into the chat box. Would you like to work here in the main room, or to go into the breakout rooms and have a bit of a chat? Back into your groups, or happy to work here? What's your preference? Breakout would be good. Okay, so what I can do, breakouts would work. Yeah, you can have a bit of a chat. And okay, let me pop you back into your breakout rooms, and I'll try and be fancy and share this screen with you so that you can find that. Okay, reopening the rooms. And so you should see your group number now, and I will share this screen to the breakout groups. Okay, let me just pause the recording for. Great, so thanks everyone for that. So let's hear your responses. Again, the aim, just to recap, the aim of this activity is, number 1, refamiliarize ourselves with, what is an academic journal article. And number 2, to be able to quickly skim, read and scan a fairly intense article for key information. And this is a really important skill to be able to, sift through a fairly dense article to find the key information that you want to suit your purpose. And then thirdly, of course, what it has to say is actually really quite important. And this article is actually, as you can see there from the date, it's an older article, but we still cite it and refer to it because it's regarded as a seminal article. So it was kind of groundbreaking when it was first published. And so, yeah, so I'll be interested to hear why that might be from your responses. So group number 1, do you have a spokesperson there just to tell us what you found for this question? So Harry, Henry, Leo and Ryan, is there someone there that would like to just give us an overview?
I can go again. Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, so they would talk about the development of code of ethics. Basically, this was because although there was legal requirements in different countries across the world, there wasn't much to guide ethical behaviour. So it was sort of based on the custom of that area or that country. So this code of ethics, it basically gave some international guidance as to how companies should behave.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's yeah, really good information. And again, yeah, that's right. Companies could pretty much do what they want. And then there was that big stock market crash in 87. And yeah, that sort of really caused people to reevaluate how they do things and how they do things within the law. So yeah, fantastic. Great point. Thanks so much. What about number 2? Group number 2, have we got a spokesperson there for Brittany, Chris or Flynn? What's corporate continuance? No, gone quiet. Or using the chat box perhaps?
I really, sorry, I'll go. I really only had a chance to just quickly read through it, and then I just had to do something else. But excuse me, I found a line where it says, strive for corporate continuance by being protective, restrictive, and regulatory with company staff, rather than developing a culture in organisations that fosters responsibility, mutual respect, and trust.
That's the key bit of information about this. Fantastic. So yeah, well done. So again, that sort of here looking at trying to, well, what does that mean? You tell me, what's your understanding of that?
I guess sort of maybe having like a holistic approach to running the company. Protective and restrictive, I guess, is sort of balancing them both out, and regulatory, maybe meeting regulations or set goals or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. I'm sort of only guessing.
No, I think you're spot on. And this is an interesting one because it ties in with our next topic of CSR. So if organisations just really focus on one aspect of the business, Chris, I think it means that instead of creating a culture of ethical behaviour, the managers tried to enforce compliance. Yeah, that is part of it, absolutely. So, and maybe that might lead into our next question with why is a commitment to corporate culture at the heart of the model? So again, if you just focus on one area, then it has flow-on effects to other areas of the business, and those, if you're doing the right thing in one area, and that will flow into other areas and that will benefit, and that rather than just for many stakeholders rather than just for one or two stakeholders. So if we look at question number 3, then this corporate culture, what is this about? Have we got someone there from group 3 to tell us about that one?
Yep, hello. So we came up with an ethical culture. It describes how the company relates to other partners and stakeholders, because previously to 1987, when everybody got a wake-up call, they were perhaps a bit too internally focused, but they realise that there's a big wide world out there, and instead of looking out for number one, if they talk to their partners, stakeholders, and a range of groups outside their organisation, they have a responsibility to those people as well. And managers play a big part in setting that cultural standard that spreads throughout the organisation.
Great. Well done. And yeah, that's right. So that it's not, and with culture, it's not something that is just set and forget. Managers have to model that, don't they? And action it. It's got to be lived and breathed, and a part of everything they do. Excellent. And number 4, why must organisations be committed to ethical organisational artefacts? Perhaps, well, what is an artefact? I guess we should ask. Have we got someone from Group 4 to tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So basically the definition that was in the article said that it can enhance the ability of employees to better corporate citizens. To be better corporate citizens. And it pretty much just said, like, without that, the ethical structure and guidelines can be counterproductive, and basically staff cannot be expected to subsume the ethos of the ethics program through osmosis, but rather the staff must be given every possible assistance to internalize for themselves the company's value system. So yeah, it was just saying that it's just really important to make sure that the companies just have better corporate citizens. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well summarised. That's right. And you found the exact relevant part in the article there too. So, and what, again, going back to my earlier question, what is an artefact that an organisation could have to help their employees know what to do?
Are you asking me or?
Oh, anyone. Yeah, but yeah, if you did it mention that in the passage where you read, or?
It didn't quite define artifact. I think it just said like the context of corporate Australia, but I'm actually not 100% sure like what the definition of an artifact is.
So I guess in this case, it's looking at like a code of ethics. So something that you can touch and see and read and show people. And I guess it's evidence of, what are the accepted practices within that organisation. And so, yeah, that sort of forms the guidelines for people's behaviour. So yeah, in this case, it is a code of ethics. And perhaps, in your organisation, you might have those sorts of similar manuals, part of the training and so on. So again, part of this is saying that it's got, the staff have to be aware of it, and it has to be, again, linking back to that culture side of things, so that it becomes part of their internal values, not something that's external to them that they only do and bring out when there is a problem, but they live and breathe it in everything they do. What about number 5 there? This was an interesting one with whistleblowers. Thank you so much for that. Really good. Have got a volunteer for number 5.
Yeah. Basically, I wouldn't do it. It pretty much ruins your life. Statistically, you pretty much always lose your job. You can end up getting lawsuits against you. Divorce is common. And it's also not good for those around you, because say it's your company that you're whistleblowing, they might lose your jobs. They might lose their jobs. So your co-workers might lose their jobs. Depending on what information you release, you might be putting people in danger. Like, for example, with military things, if you put information out there, then missions might be uncovered. People might be put in danger. You should also consider ramifications job-wise. People might not want to hire you afterwards, and the same goes for your co-workers if they know you've been involved in a scandal, especially with industry-specific jobs. An example someone else gave was that if you're a receptionist and you whistleblow, probably not that bad, go into a different industry. But if you are industry specific and that's the only thing you qualified for, it can really change your life. Some people even lose their houses and go bankrupt.
Yeah, it's pretty sobering reading, isn't it, with those statistics there? And Julian Assange is, yes, that's another role model there of the consequences. Many companies have anti-retaliation procedures in place. Yeah, that's right. There has been some laws. So since this article was written, there have been some laws introduced to protect whistleblowers. And a lot of companies, and perhaps you might be familiar with where you work, they have anonymous phone lines hotlines that you can ring to report misdoings and so on. But yeah, it's still fraught with difficulties for many of the reasons that you just outlined there. Yeah, really, yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned you want the public on your side. You don't want to be ostracized for what you revealed.
And again, going back to our culture, I mean, a lot of, when you're in primary school, don't be a dobber, and, it's sort of frowned upon, isn't it? Early on, you don't tell on your friends or things like that. But and if that carries over, snitches get stitches. That's a good. I'll have to remember that one. So yeah, that's right. So part of our cultural makeup is against whistleblowers. But of course, again, going back to our earlier conversations, when we're looking at different dilemmas, if something doesn't sit right with you, if you're losing sleep over people thieving or whatever, then yeah, based on your ethical principles, you might feel like have a responsibility to take that further. So but it's very much fraught. And so this question number 6 is an interesting one too. Why should we think of our competitors and their welfare when transacting business? Oh, just a very detailed comment there from Carla. Oh, thank you, Carla. You should think carefully when participating in transactions with competitors because you don't know what lies around the corner. A competitor today could be your business partner, ally tomorrow. Good point. Wood states in the article that some organisations meet the lowest expectations when it comes to law, but it's more than appreciated on the receiving end from their competitor to be treated above the standard requirements. Another main point that he states is that this behaviour may be worth fostering as it can cause everyone to win, including the consumers. Fantastic. So very detailed and spot on. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So you might think, no, what our competitors do, it's their problem. Let's win at all costs. But we're part of the same environment. And so what we do impacts others and vice versa. So if we succeed, then we all succeed. You don't want your industry to get a bad name. Spot on, that's right. And it has flow-on effects, doesn't it? So being aware of that and doing right, then that can let everyone win. So yeah, this at the time was quite revolutionary, and that's why we still refer to this article, because it's presenting an ethical framework for organisations that hadn't existed before or hadn't been articulated or hadn't been practiced, but it's as we can see the value there. So number 7, I'll open this up to anybody. What's the main message from this?
Group 3 have a crack?
Go for it.
We came up with it's a rethink of how organisations conduct business after the shockwave of the 1987 stock market crash to focus more on ethics and partnerships. I might be a bit older than some of the people in the group, but I remember that my parents lost their house straight after that because of the interest rates going up. Yeah. And some people might have remembered the 1980s movie Wall Street, where the greed is good. That was the ethics. That was the way it was back then. But then after that, people realised that there might be a better way of doing business.
Yeah, that's right. It was such a hedonistic sort of period until it wasn't. And then, yeah, the smack down to earth was very hard for a lot of people. I'm so sorry to hear that about your family.
Oh, it's all right. It's all good.
I'm glad it's had a happy
That's right.
ending.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's very, very tough, isn't it? And, you know, many people are starting to feel that now, so I might have some empathy there. And yeah, this ties in. Everyone is responsible for enforcing ethical behavior. Great. And if we look back at our 7 principles there, maybe it is, you know, that common good, what is good for everybody, and to try and do the right thing. What's good for the community is good for us all. All right, well, thank you all for those contributions. And I know it's a bit of a hard ask to look at a heavy topic like this after a busy day at uni or work, but hopefully, again, I get just those skills and the content there just sort of is a good sort of bookend to our discussions so far. So let me just clear that. And that leads us now to the second topic, and I know we're sort of running a little bit out of time, but this is looking at, there is a video here. I don't know if we've got quite enough time to watch it, but I will share the link with you. This is looking at doctors and working, a number of doctors here in Victoria put together a class action in response to working overtime and claiming and basically just working so long and for such long hours, you know, 36 hours plus in one shift, that it was having a dangerous effect on not only their own health, but also perhaps having the responsibility for patient care and so on. So it's quite an interesting viewpoint from in this case the medical industry or the health industry, and the dangers that come from, you know, where those questioning those sorts of practices on workers and the obligations that employers have to look after their workers. Overworked doctors can make mistakes and harm the people they're meant to help. Absolutely. And, you know, in the video they say that, you know, if you haven't slept, it can be, when you're driving home, it can be the equivalent of perhaps being over the limit. It has, you know, it dulls your senses in that sort of similar sort of way. So yeah, very, very dangerous. Yeah, working long hours, also insecure employment, cultural expectations to just do it. You know, the senior doctors, I had to do it, so you had to do it. So there's a lot of different issues there. And again, you might reflect on perhaps your own workplace or experiences that perhaps you've heard from friends and so on. Hard to have a good bedside manner when you're overloaded. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's right. In that sort of sector, you would, in that caring health sector, you would think that employers would have a greater understanding about how to look after their own. So yeah, do have a look at that one if you have a moment. But so just again to tie in, I think we have covered many of these questions here. In terms of the ethical guidelines that organisations can undertake. So having things like those artefacts we talked about with a code of ethics. We also talked about the measures to hire people who had good values that align with the organisation. And also we also mentioned too, for managers to model the behaviour that they want to see played out in their organisation. Any other thoughts there that you can think of in relation to these questions? Any comments? Okay, well, I've just got one other quick activity for you for the another quick Mentimeter. So let me just get that side up there again, and I'll get you to have again, it won't take very long, hopefully, and hopefully you let me know if you can see the screen. Can everyone see the second question?
Mine is coming up as the same question as earlier.
Oh, okay. can you just refresh your page? Does that make a difference?
No, it's still the same.
Okay. All right. Not to worry. Same URL. Yeah, it's the same URL. It's just on a separate page on that URL. So it must be me doing something. So
I'll try submit a response and then maybe it might let me do next question.
Yeah, okay, maybe. Otherwise, I think we'll just skip it and move on. Let me just see if I can get rid of that. Don't worry. Well, the question was just asking if what do you think are the most important CSR issues facing organisations today? It says waiting for responses. Anyway, look, it's probably me doing something at my end, so don't stress. But yeah, just in general, what do you think are some of those key issues that organisations need to be mindful of for, sorry, let me go back to the PowerPoint. And so I was talking to another student about the consultations there. So this is looking at corporate social responsibility is the second topic, and so some of the key issues relate to, or as we can see here, these are the SDG goals. So the United Nations put together a list of sustainable development goals. There are 17 of them, and these are, there used to be less, but they have added more to them. And large organisations in particular are signing up to them. Not all of them, but and they're showing how they are working towards meeting these different sort of goals. And again, with CSR, this is sort of going beyond the legal requirements of, you know, not polluting and, you know, those sorts of things, but going a bit beyond and doing extra to perhaps benefit the community that they're operating in, or perhaps their suppliers are operating in. And so I'll share with you, I'll get the link up and just go here. So this is the link here, and you can see how they have this variety of different goals, and you can click on each tile and just sort of see how they're going and what they mean. And so with different organisations, and this is what you'll need to have a look at with your organisation. I've got Kmart here because that was the activity, but we're sort of fast running out of time. But this is looking at, so they're just as an example, but you would look at Transurban or AGL and look at their CSR page. Now, organisations are, you know, often very eager to advertise and promote what they are doing. And as we can see here, they're addressing their commitments to culture, respecting human rights, but also the planet, the environmental side of things. And you can see what they're doing in relation to those aspects. So, and organisations might also have a separate report that addresses their CSR policies or sustainability policies that you might have a look at for your organisation. But something to keep in mind is perhaps as a critical thinker, when you're looking at what from the organisational perspective, they're going to be saying they're doing great things, but you might then look at some independent sources such as media articles and so on that might either confirm those good things, or they might present a different alternative picture of what they may be doing or maybe have done in the past, and so on. So getting that sort of balanced viewpoint might be good for your 1.2 assignment. So this is just for Kmart there. Another aspect to consider is, this is something else too, not necessarily useful for our assignment with our organisations, but just in general, this is the Oxfam company tracker. and again, I'll share the link with you, but this is looking at the policies and practices of organizations, particularly working with third-party suppliers and seeing how, if they've got manufacturing facilities in different countries and just seeing how they operate. And so you can see they've rated a number of these familiar organizations and in terms of their transparency of policies. And again, this is often a compliance thing. They have to report those things. Like, for example, the Modern Slavery Act requires organizations to show what they are doing in terms of, practices to prevent slavery in their, not only in the organization, but in their supply chains. And you can see how some of these organizations here are faring. So that's another resource. So the point of these sorts of things is that organizations have to be accountable and show those sorts of things. Is this Oxfam holding other corporations publicly accountable? Yeah, you're right. So they are evaluating how others are going in terms of what they are doing and the transparency of what they're doing. Jeans West, where is that? Oh, yes. Oh, and JJ's there too. Yeah. So, and as us as consumers, and it's linking back, isn't it, to that community, the more aware we are of these sorts of things, we can act more ethically as consumers. And we might say, well, look, what they're doing isn't good enough, so therefore I might shop somewhere else. Yeah, and this is just increasing awareness and knowledge, isn't it? Fascinating, and more of that is out there. So again, I can't see Kmart here, but we might. Target is there. So again, you might compare their CSR page and say, okay, well, how does that, you just missed it. Oh, there it is. Thank you for that. So yeah, it's good in some things, but not so good in other things. So what's that fourth category? Publish your plans. Okay, so if we have a look at their site, what are they doing? Where are their plans? So we might need to investigate that a bit further. I wonder how up to date this is. That might be something else to evaluate. When was this done? Why is pay a living wage blank? Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I'd have to investigate that. Maybe let us know. But yeah, there we go. So a few things there to increase our awareness of these sorts of measures. So just mindful that we are on the time. So again, for your assignment, what you need to do is have a look at the website, the relevant page on your company's website, see the approaches that they've taken to CSR recently. And you don't need to focus on the SDG goals or the Modern Slavery Act for this assignment, but it might be interesting just as out of curiosity if you have time. And so the idea is, what is CSR in general, and then the application to your organization. The other thing too, if you're interested in this topic, because it is such a fascinating topic, is to follow up with the business and law student toolkits. And you might start by doing one of the modules there and expanding and taking up some further different activities. And you can complete, once you do complete a certain number of those tasks, you can receive a certificate, and it looks great on your resumes. Again, this is something that is becoming a really important tool and for companies to be aware, and they want to hire people who know these sorts of things too. You think Oxfam is going to get sued for that? Oh, I hope not. All right, so we have almost come to the end of the class. Are there any questions, any comments that you want to add about this session? And I apologise for those last activities being a little bit rushed, but I think we were able to cover most of the main points. All right, well, if you do have questions after the class, you're always welcome to post them to the discussion session. And so that will be it for this week. I wish you all the very best for your assignment, and thank you again for your great contributions. It's always wonderful to hear your comments and experiences, and share that with everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week. See you next time. Bye for now.